Last summer, I was traveling with my sister, Judy, and her husband, Vern. And one day, we had a lot of miles to cover, and I was driving. And I have to tell you, I never get sleepy when I'm driving. But as I was driving about 2 hours or so, I did start to feel a little bit fatigued. And just then, there on the dashboard, there appeared the image of a steaming cup of coffee with the words, "Stop as soon as you can safely and take a rest." That happened. I don't know where it came from or what I did to cause it, but it kind of scared me that the car was reading my mind. The first thing I did was I looked to make sure that Vern did not see the display that I did. He was looking out the window, and Judy was in the back seat reading a book. So I realized they didn't know that I had been prompted. So I simply announced loudly, "We've been driving for a while. It's about time that we take a rest. And Vern, why don't you take over driving?" So we did stop, and I think eventually I told them about this display in the car. Don't you hate it when the cars are smarter than you are? I didn't expect that, but it was a good prompt. It was what I needed to hear. It basically said, "Driver, whoever you are," it didn't call me by name, it's not quite that good yet, but driver, stay awake, don't become drowsy. That's what Advent is. Stay awake, don't become drowsy. In fact, it's more specific than that. In this gospel passage I just read from Luke, and we've begun the year of Luke, and we will be reading from Luke quite a bit. It says, "Do not let your hearts become drowsy." So I've been thinking about that a lot this week, because the heart is a symbol, obviously, of the core of who we are. The heart represents relationships with other people. Of course, the heart is the symbol of love. Don't let the heart, that symbol of love and relationship, grow drowsy. Because when you do, you forget what you're all about. Now, just as a driver can kind of slip into sleepiness without even knowing about it, that's probably happening to all of us in terms of our heart, our relationships. We become a little callous, we become a little indifferent, we become unloving without even knowing it. We slip into it. So Advent comes along, and it's not just about preparing for Christmas, but it's a time to say, let's take a look at your whole life. Where's your heart? Is your heart alive? Is your heart awake? Is your heart tuned in to the people around you? And I love the second reading, Paul's letter to the Thessalonians. These were among the first words that St. Paul ever wrote, his first letter. And he basically said, you've got to practice loving each other. And in that way, you're going to discover the power of the love of God. We've got to practice loving each other. And yet we slip out of it so easily. I remember a woman who worked with the elderly at a nursing home, and she was really good and very dedicated, and she enjoyed it. She truly did. But she told me she was so worried that she would become indifferent to the residents. Like, you see a person today and another one, and she said, I'm afraid that I would just kind of grow so used to somebody's plight that I would no longer be aware of what they're going through. I want to be tuned in. In other words, she was saying, I don't want my heart to become drowsy. I want to stay tuned in. Now, what is it? How do we keep our hearts from becoming drowsy? The first thing is we have to become sensitive. We have to learn to listen to other people and pay attention. How many times, and we've all done this, how many times somebody else is talking to us and we're sort of listening, sort of, but the truth is we're kind of waiting for them to stop so that we can add our part. And instead of a conversation, it's a debate. We become sensitive by putting ourselves into the other person's heart, into their being, trying to experience what they experience. We have so much of us versus them going on. Sometimes we have to discover the them is like us. We are on the same side because we're all going through the same experience of life, and life can be tough. So we become more sensitized. This is our goal. Sometimes we also become more loving, and we awaken our hearts by having a more profound experience right under our nose. And it awakens us to possibilities. It's like that steaming cup of coffee. And I had that experience on Wednesday of this week. Last week, we had to ask all the people in the parish to bring in their non-perishable food items for the pantry up at St. Louis Helping Hands in Toledo. And you guys were great. Thank you very much. So much came in. Wednesday morning was the real moving experience when dozens of families, we asked for kids, grades 3 to 6, sometimes younger siblings came, sometimes older siblings, of course, along with their parents. But all these kids came in, and there were dozens and dozens of kids. And they took all those bags of food, and they spread it out in the back, and they did a pre-sort so that cans would be together and boxes of cereals would be together and so forth. Then we carried all of it to the cars and then trucked it up to East Toledo. They unloaded the cars and then took it into the pantry and did a new resort. And I was standing there watching, and all these kids were working so not only hard or diligently, but enthusiastically. I mean, they really put their hearts into it. And you know what it really reminded me of? An anthill with all the ants scurrying around, but they all had a purpose, and they were all busy doing something. And they did not give up. They just kept on working till it was all sorted. That kind of experience that we need to see once in a while refreshes all of us and reminds us, why can't we have that same enthusiasm about helping other people? Why can't we be just as energetic and saying, I'm willing to go outside of myself? And while they were doing that, everything else ceased to exist because they were in the moment. Advent is a time to be in the moment. It's a gift to have this time before Christmas to allow our hearts to be reawakened and to realize we are called to be loving people in relationship with others. And as we learn to love others, we will rediscover the power of the love of God.